Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Melanie Dizon and I'm the Director of Education at the Davis-Phinney Foundation. And today I'm really excited to have this group of Parkinson's physical therapists to talk about the value of having a physical therapist on your care team and how they can help you from the very beginning of diagnosis to live well and to get the skills that your body needs to handle a lot of the symptoms that you have and make sure that you're on a continual path to better mobility and living well. So welcome everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I'd like for everybody to have a chance to talk to you about who they are, how they got into this work, and why they believe physical therapy is so important for people with Parkinson's. So Angie, can we start with you?
Yeah, my name is Angee Ludwa. I live in Clarkston, Michigan, which is just south of Flint. I work in Grand Blanc, Michigan for outpatient neuro clinic 2 days a week, and the rest of the time I teach community-based exercise classes. I teach power moves, rock steady boxing in the community for people with Parkinson's. So I really like working in the clinic because that's when I get the one-on-one skill time with the clients. And I guess my philosophy has changed over the years because I've been practicing for like 23 years. But I would say that I do a lot of education, and that's number one. And also, I guess the intensity has increased. So my philosophy is I want it to be difficult but doable. So that would be my main thing.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Nate, how about you?
Right. My name is Nate Coomer. I live and work in Seattle, Washington, and we work on a team at the Parkinson's Fitness Project. So started a company about 2 or 3 years ago, focusing mainly on physical therapy and classes for Parkinson's disease, and trying to make those classes and PT sessions feel a little more energetic and like part of the community, not so much like another medical appointment. So that was really our goal. And it's been a lot of fun to do. It's been the most fulfilling thing I've ever been able to do. So that is kind of leads me into why I got into working with Parkinson's. I've been a neurologic kind of specialist in physical therapy for a number of years. And really over time just found people with Parkinson's to be so proactive, such good people with great support systems, and I loved working with them. And the more classes I went to figure out how best to kind of treat these people, the more I kind of fell in love with it and wanted to do more. And so that's why I kind of started the Parkinson's Fitness Project, and it's been a lot of fun ever since. PT philosophy for me, like I said, there's so many times where I worked in a hospital and saw people coming in with Parkinson's into another medical appointment being physical therapy, and it just felt so sterile. And knowing that the research was pushing us toward more intensive exercise and more community-based exercise, and having this support system around exercise, I want every client that comes in my doors to feel hope and to feel encouragement. And hopefully I can be a good PT to them and help them with their function and help them, progress and move forward with their function. But I want everybody leaving my doors and coming in my doors feeling a little bit of hope.
I love that. Okay, Sarah, I'm just going around the list. I'm going around my circle here. Sarah.
Beautiful. Yeah, I would love to follow that. So I'm Sarah King. I'm a Parkinson's physical therapist in Austin, Texas. I founded Invigorate Physical Therapy and Wellness at the end of 2014. And it started out as a one-on-one practice, seeing people in their homes in Austin, and it expanded into a digital program, multiple programs actually. And now I'm exclusively digital, which means all of my courses are online for anyone to access nationally, internationally, and we help people establish a Parkinson's plan of attack and then help them execute it. So we have exercise courses. We just launched a nutrition course with a dietitian, and I never expected that this would be where my PT career would take me. I knew I wanted to be in wellness, but I actually met my very first Parkinson's client at the hospital. And the reason I latched on so tightly to her was because her physician had told her that she'd be in a wheelchair in 5 years, that she should get her affairs in order and then pray for a cure and take her medications. And she showed up at PT essentially saying, I don't know why I'm here. I'm going to be in a wheelchair. My doctor told me I should come. I don't know what you can do for me, but I'm here. And as the people on this call will attest, exercise did wonders for her. And this was before I was certified, before, I knew exercise would be good for her, but we got to the end of 30 days and she had gotten back to walking with her husband, which she was scared to do. She had gotten rid of her shoulder pain, her back pain. She was cleaning her own laundry and cleaning her own home. And she looked at me and she said, I never thought I'd be able to do this again. You changed my life. And for a healthcare practitioner, that's pretty much like crack cocaine. So I've been addicted ever since. And that just grew into volunteering, grew into starting Invigorate, and now has grown into this digital practice that I get to build a community with people all over the world. So my philosophy has always been meet people where they are. Like that woman, she was terrified. She was undereducated as far as what her diagnosis meant and the resources available to her. But she had the power within her to take charge of her diagnosis. And all she needed was, like Nate said, hope, someone to meet her where she is, and then give her the tools that she needs and then encourage her on her way. So that's what I try and do, is just empower people and then encourage them, and do a lot of recommending. So I think that that's one thing that really drives me forward, is improving access to people like the people on this call, because we are pretty rare people who have Parkinson's certifications that are PTs that are running our own practices. We're very few and far between. So I like improving access to Parkinson's care and making sure that people all over can have a second chance at living the best life that they can. So I love it.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Okay, Mike.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Braitsch. I'm in Dallas, Texas. And 3 years ago, I started a company called Tribe Wellness. And all of that came about, like a few people experienced, completely beyond my plans, or out of the scope of my plans. Prior to becoming a physical therapist, I used to tour around the country and do a lot of amateur fighting. I've taught martial arts and trained people for most of my life. And as a physical therapist in my first clinical rotation, I was at a clinic that specialized in treating patients with Parkinson's. And we used a lot of the kind of out-of-dated philosophy in that clinic of get somebody in the clinic, take them through a lot of PT sessions in a short period of time until they've either met their goals or maximized what insurance will cover, and then tell them to go and be active. And for me, that was pretty tough to see. It was pretty tough to experience, because I found that people with Parkinson's, more than other folks that I treated, really responded more quickly to exercise and did very well with exercise. But at discharge, when I told them to go and be active, they'd say, okay, well, where can I do that? Where am I going to feel comfortable? And so as I continued on in my PT training, I decided to try using some of my old skills in training fighters. And I put together a pilot program before Rocksteady was kind of a big thing. And we did a trial program for boxing for Parkinson's. It was a big success with UT Southwestern Medical Center here in Dallas. And at the end of it, people said, this was great. I feel better. I'm moving better. Now what can I do? And so I had to change my plans. And what I saw in that group program is that the power of the group was much more than anything I could do as a therapist to help people. And so at Tribe Wellness, what we do, we've got 18 group exercise programs each week for people with Parkinson's and other movement disorders. We use the group programs as the mainstay of care, and then we use one-on-one sessions as more of a tune-up or a way to really focus on individual skill development, trying to hit things that we don't get to cover as well in class for people. So it's been a wild ride, and now we get to do boxing and yoga and Tai Chi. We've got a hiking group. We've got a core and balance group. We get to have a lot of fun.
Great. I love it. I love how you all came into it from a different way, and different things sparked your interest in working with this population. And you're working with people in a different way right now. I think it's all great. And it's great for people with Parkinson's to hear that there's not one way that physical therapy works. So we briefly touched on it, but this is the question that around PT that we get the most. So I'd love for one of you to dive into this. What is the value of getting a diagnosis and immediately working with a physical therapist? You know, they hear it, I'm supposed to work with a physical therapist, but they're like, but I'm really not that bad. I was just diagnosed. Why do I need to do this? Why do they?
I think the biggest thing, I hear that question all the time, and I think it's one of the things that makes me the most passionate about being a PT for Parkinson's, is because there's so much that you can cover proactively before things get too far along with a PT. Every time I talk in front of a group, a support group, or an event around town with our local nonprofits, it's one of the biggest things I try to advocate for, is for everybody to get in touch with a PT, no matter how early you're diagnosed, because there's something that doctors are seeing and that you're seeing that brought you into the doctor, and it's probably has something to do with movement. So let's see how we can tackle it together. And a lot of times people, their first move will maybe be to get in with a trainer, but they don't always go down. They understand exercise is good, but exercise can be so much more powerful when there's a functional purpose to it. And that's where PTs, all of us on this board, really come in extremely handy. So I think if nothing else, if you're doing really good, you don't feel like you need a PT, at least get in to customize your home program so that you can tackle those areas that you already have trouble with.
Yeah, and I mentioned this earlier too. I think education is key too, because I find that the doctors just don't have time when they're at their appointment to really share a lot of information about Parkinson's and the different symptoms. So at the first assessment, I'm always providing a lot of information, resources, what's available, information about the Davis-Phinney Foundation, just so that they're aware that they're not alone. You know, you have help out there. So I always try to provide them with as much as they can the first day they come in.
Great, thanks. So what are some of the movement patterns that Parkinson's impacts the most? What are your clients, sort of initial session coming in when they've been newly diagnosed? What are some of those initial patterns that are needing work?
For me, I think it's not movement pattern specific, and that's where when I work with trainers in the community too, I try to educate them on that. There's not a go-to exercise that's going to help everyone with Parkinson's, because the movement impairments are very diverse. But I think, like so many people have said, having a baseline to take some effective measurements for functional movements is a big deal, and something to get on top of as quickly as possible, because that way down the road, as things change, you're able to go back to those same measurements and say, oh, wow, based on that, this is the muscle group that needs the most of your attention, or a few different muscle groups or movements. I think probably everybody in this group would agree that the number one enemy for people early on is probably the same physical enemy as that of normal aging, which is this, I like to call it the Mr. Burns posture. I grew up watching The Simpsons. Mr. Burns was a character on The Simpsons who was kind of huddled over like this. And I think the more people can focus on stuff that all of our grandmas told us all of our lives, of sit up straight, try to draw your shoulder blades back and down. And I think in general, if you can strengthen muscles on the back side of the body and stretch muscles on the front side of the body, you tend to do a lot better. But like so many people have mentioned, just basic education of neuroprotective effects of exercise are really helpful right after diagnosis, and resources, because there's so much coming at somebody right away when they're first diagnosed that giving them places where they can turn for more help when they're ready or when they need it is an even bigger deal.
And I think that a lot of people associate Parkinson's with a tremor, as far as that being the movement pattern, or some type of movement that's associated with Parkinson's. And like Mike said, posture is affected, walking is affected, arm swing. But I think something that goes unnoticed is, I think, an article that I wrote for the Davis-Phinney Foundation, were the movement patterns that you don't associate with Parkinson's. You're starting to have trouble rolling over in bed. You're starting to have trouble getting out of a chair or getting out of a car. You're just noticing that maybe you can't walk around the grocery store with as much confidence. And so it's not like Parkinson's, once you're diagnosed, you switch your lens to saying, this is Parkinson's. It's just these daily things that have crept up that you might not associate with Parkinson's, but going to see a physical therapist who's been trained in identifying how Parkinson's affects your day-to-day is really valuable, because they may be able to parse out, oh, that's not just getting older or whatnot. It's actually Parkinson's affects that, and we can improve, we can help you go about your day a little bit easier and improve your posture, make sure your leg doesn't drag and your arm swings a little bit more. But it's the day-to-day things, getting off the toilet, feeling confident to put your pants on, those types of things that aren't usually associated with Parkinson's, that may make or break your day-to-day.
Yeah, I think that's really important. What, you know, when people, a lot of times they'll get the diagnosis and they kind of have the before diagnosis, after diagnosis life, right? And they think that I'm not going to be able to get better at anything after this diagnosis, right? And by going in to see a physical therapist, I mean, they could have Parkinson's, but be, you know, 100 times stronger than they were a year before the diagnosis, right? So I think that's a really great thing to just realize, no, you can actually make significant improvements. This is not, we're just trying to get you by. We're here to help you make improvements, and you know, you're gonna live a long time with Parkinson's. So you wanna make it as good as possible.
And it can happen fast.
Yeah,
it doesn't
right?
take a long time. I think I've taken a guy from like not being able to skip to skipping in one session, you know,
Yeah,
and he
well,
never thought he'd be able to.
Guy, Sarah and Mike, you may have seen this or remembered it, but when we were, it was just one of the most fascinating things I'd seen when we were at the Little Big Things event in Austin. And there was a gentleman he was, you know, an older gentleman, and he was walking, and he was just the, you know, classic Parkinson shuffle. He just, his feet were shuffling. He maybe an inch, you know, every time he moved his foot. It took him a long time to get through the place to sit down. And then I looked up one minute, and he had the walking poles, the Nordic poles, and he was flying across the floor. Like, are you like an Olympian? I mean, where did he come from? It was crazy. And I think that, you know, he spent 5 minutes with Mandy from Urban Polling to just be like, here's what it is. And it was unbelievable. And I think it's like those kinds of things that people see, and we're like, wow, if I went to PT, like they could help me really get my mobility and movement back like that. It's like, yeah, you know, they really can.
Right.
Yeah. So why balance is a huge problem for people with Parkinson's? Why is balance such a difficult thing?
Do you want me to start? I'll start, then you guys chime in, because it's such a big topic.
You don't have to go the whole way, but just like, what is it? They ask us, like, why can't I get my balance?
Yeah, like balance is, first of all, it's really challenging because the medication that most people take for Parkinson's doesn't like really help improve balance. So, and there's so many aspects that, you know, help control balance. You have like, you have to have strength, you have to have good vision, your vestibular system. There's so many different type of information that's coming in that you have to process, that when that's impaired, it's really challenging for people with Parkinson's to react automatically to some of these postural changes. So, you know, as a result, they're falling, and we know falls are pretty prevalent with people with Parkinson's. So balance is like, for me, when I work in the clinic, that's probably everyone that comes in, about 90% of people that come in, that's one of their biggest complaints is balance. And so working with those postural changes can be challenging. So it's really important, I think, to go see a physical therapist, you know, someone who knows Parkinson's, so they can work with them one-on-one to really address what those specific balance needs are, because everyone's different. You know, not everyone has the same balance issues. So that's why going to a physical therapist, doing that thorough initial evaluation can really help kind of decide where those balance issues are and what we need to work on.
Yeah, I just kind of feedback on that same, you know, it can be, balance is so varied in so many people. You know, you can have, like Angie was saying, so many different elements coming into play. And I think the one big one that a lot of therapists can also kind of tackle is cognition, and how that affects your balance and your balance reactions and your ability to understand where you're at in space, and to make quality movements when you lose your balance. So that's one of my favorite areas to work on, because I feel like it's something that's not really well understood, but there's some great research out there that physical therapists who kind of specialize in Parkinson's disease are aware of and picking up on, when it comes to initiating movement, stopping movement, and slowing themselves down, that we can really add into a treatment that makes it even more beneficial for balance.
Okay, so are you saying, you know, if you're working on something, the balance with somebody, you might give them a cognitive task,
Exactly.
And so you're just kind of continuing to build in, so they're having to do that, like, right, they have trouble walking and looking at the phone or talking to somebody, and yeah.
So I always put it in the example of, you walk across the street. I'm in Seattle right now, so if I walked out here, there'd be a busy street outside of our clinic. There's a walk sign, it flashes, there's stoplights, there's cars coming, there's cars turning left, they've got their blinkers on, are they gonna go? I'm about to step off of this curb, which is also a difficult thing for me. I need to focus on this step, but I have all this incoming stimulation. And that's just one example of like your entire life. And balance issues come on not just from having difficult physical impairments with the disease, but also cognitive processing, reaction time slowing down. And we need to find exercises when we're working with people in the clinic that actually challenge them to dual task, think about two things at once, process information from coming in from different angles. And there's, it's a lot of fun, but it also has really been shown when we do this through research that balance improves and falls go down.
That's great. We know we've got the memo, right, that exercise is great, and everybody with Parkinson's, that's the first thing they hear. Exercise is great. They're often thinking about cycling or running or boxing or doing those kinds of things. Why is it specifically important for people with Parkinson's to keep building muscle and for weight training? Why is that such an important piece?
I'll jump in there. So any type of exercise, like you mentioned, Mel, is helpful because it can help alleviate some of the rigidity and stiffness. It can help to slow the progression of symptoms. And anybody on this call will tell you all about how it can help you preserve motor patterns in your brain. In terms of strength, long before physical therapy, when I was working around or going around the country as an amateur fighter, I worked for a living as a financial planner, and I used to help folks look at their retirement savings and building up savings as a big reserve that they could draw down on in retirement. And I think for strength, it's kind of a similar philosophy of, if you can build strength and build a functional reserve of strength, even if you didn't have Parkinson's, through normal aging, a ton of science will show that we're at risk for muscle wasting, sarcopenia. It's normal to lose strength over time. So if you can boost your muscle strength and your workload capacity before things get too badly, as the disease progresses, you're going to be able to hang on to more of what you've got, and you're going to be able to function better Or if you're one of those folks who likes to do everything on your own, by the time you get to physical therapy, there's less of an uphill climb. So time can be spent more on things you want to do instead of focusing on building strength and capacity to do the workload that you need to do.
That is great. I love, love, love that analogy. I think it's, it's something like you got to have it. Let's build it while you're actually in the best possible shape to build it, right? It's only going to get harder as the disease progresses. And if you're able to kind of halt that progression by getting stronger, then you're only going to have a better experience with it over the long term.
Yeah, I wish I had done this session in our main room of the clinic. I've got a big picture of Jack LaLanne on our wall from his 70th birthday, towing rowboats across the San Francisco Bay. So that way when people say, well, I'm whatever age I am, I couldn't do that, I can just point to Jack LaLanne and say, well, that's him at 70, and here's a picture of him at 95 pumping iron every day. So anybody can do it. It's never too late.
Yeah, that's actually, I think, one of the most fascinating things about working with people with Parkinson's is that, for some people it's tough, right? They kind of spent their whole life and they didn't exercise. And then all of a sudden someone tells them, you got to exercise every day. And they're like, what are you talking about? I can't do that. I hated it my whole life. How am I going to start doing it now? And then there's the whole set that, they were mobile pretty much for their life, but they are more fit now than they've ever been. Mm-hmm. And they say, this is like the grateful Parkinson's piece, right? Where they are, if Parkinson's hadn't happened, they never would be able to do the things that they're doing. They wouldn't ride across the country or be in boxing classes or, do those giant walks that you guys do, Mike, and all of those things. I mean, it's pretty great to see. What about, this is a big one too. What about pain in Parkinson's? How can physical therapy help mitigate pain for people?
I can start this one off. I think that pain is multifaceted in Parkinson's. It can come from a lot of different areas, but people diagnosed with Parkinson's tend to be really stiff, if not have a lot of rigidity. And so moving can sometimes hurt, actually, actually going through those motions, stretching your joints all the way to end range, which don't really get there very often with Parkinson's anyway, can be uncomfortable. So I think the tendency is to say, well, moving kind of hurts, and so I should do it less. And then as you move less, your body is less able to circulate the fluids. You've got all kinds of fluids that are supposed to make its rounds around your body head to toe every day, multiple times a day. Your blood, your lymph, your oxygen, everything's supposed to circulate. That's the way that it's like a pond sits still for too long. It starts to, get gross and grimy, versus a river stays clear because it's always moving. So with pain, moving your body and flushing out toxins and taking your muscles and your tendons and your joints through their entire range of motion is actually really calming on your system for the long run, but it takes time to build that up. If you've never really moved very much, or if you're meeting a Parkinson's PT for the first time and we're telling you to stretch even further than you're comfortable, it's gonna be uncomfortable at first, but in the long run, you'll build up, like Mike was saying, a reserve of kind of this strength and this resiliency, and your muscles will feel less tight over time. And you do have to keep it up every day. That's why we all say exercise is medicine for Parkinson's, because you wouldn't take your levodopa Monday and then expect Monday's dose to take you all the way through Saturday and then only take a dose on Monday. It's the same with exercise. You've got to do it consistently so that it actually works for you. And that's can alleviate a little bit of the pain that can come with Parkinson's.
And I find too, and you probably all find this too, a lot of the participants will come to my class and they'll say, oh, my back's a little painful, my shoulders hurt. But by the time they're done with the exercise class, they feel so much better. They say their pain is better. They can move better. So it's good for them to realize, oh, if I move, I'm going to help decrease this pain. So then they come back and they'll keep exercising because they realize, wow, this is really good for my body. It helps me decrease my pain level.
I think this is another great area for advocating for physical therapy, because so often people are just told after they get diagnosed, hey, exercise is good. And they go, hog wild 3 hours a day, pedaling on that bicycle or whatever it may be, going to 4 classes a day, 7 days a week, and they burn out, and they, you know, they're already dealing with other issues throughout a good life of activity. Maybe it's arthritis, maybe it's, you know, surgeries, past surgeries that they haven't really had to, you know, figure out how to work out consistently around. And so that's where we can all come in and have a really beneficial impact from the start in terms of educating people as to how much exercise is beneficial, educating people maybe when they need to tone it down a little bit and find that happy medium to keep their body happy, and then to modify exercises. That's the cool thing about running classes here, is learning, you know, all the different modifications that people make, and to keep going and to keep consistent. And they can do it once they're working with somebody who has some knowledge and can kind of show them what they need to do to adapt to perform the other exercises that everybody else in the class is doing.
Yeah, I'm going to echo Nate's point. Physical therapists are known as the movement experts. The entry-level degree to practice independently now is a doctorate. So since Parkinson's is something that tends to hit people later in life, after they've had some living and some adventures and some wear and tear on their joints, it's really helpful to have somebody who has an in-depth understanding of the body, more than just a weekend training workshop, and who has a lot of experience on how to modify, how to identify signs and symptoms that maybe this is more than just muscle soreness, or maybe this is something you should see not your movement disorders doctor for, but an orthopedic doctor or an internal medicine doctor. I think we can just add tremendous value. And there are a lot of great trainers out there and folks who run group exercise classes who are helpful. But I think the value we can bring is that in-depth clinical knowledge to the community in a way that most people can't.
Yeah, well said.
Sorry, I was muted. We're going to talk a little bit about that, that idea of, you know, how to make sure that you're working with the right person and you're getting the right care that you need. We'll talk about that in a little bit. One of the questions that I got when I was telling people that I was going to do this was about sleep. And is physical therapy helpful for people who have trouble sleeping? And that's a big thing. I mean, exercise is, but like what, you know, what can we tell these people?
I'll start. Again, I always go back to this education piece. Like this, we talk about sleep hygiene. Like, are you taking a lot of naps during the day? Is that why you're not sleeping at night? Are you having a hard time falling asleep? Are you falling asleep but then waking up in the middle of the night? And so there's so much that can be said about sleep, but of course we always talk about exercise helps people because they're moving more during the day, so they'll be tired at night, so they'll sleep better. But then again, like as far as sleep hygiene, are you going to sleep in with not the TV on? Are you giving yourself, you know, time to wind down before you go to sleep? If you have to use the bathroom, are you making sure you're not drinking liquids like an hour before you go to bed? So I talk a lot about that in addition to like the exercise classes, just their overall sleep hygiene. And maybe they need to go back to their neurologist or movement disorder specialist to see if there's something that they can provide to help with better sleep. Maybe they need to change their medication cycle or regime. So again, back to the education piece is I think we're physical therapists who know Parkinson's can really play an important role with helping people sleep better.
Great, thanks. Okay, so let's move on to an actual PT appointment. So what is, let's say, you know, you see a new appointment on your calendar, somebody's coming in for the first time, they've never seen a physical therapist before, they've had Parkinson's for, you know, 6 months or so. What does that first assessment look like? What can somebody expect? How do they prepare for it? I'm sure you all have different things to say. I'd love to hear how you all approach it.
I can start off. Mike hit it on the head earlier. Outcome measures, if you're just diagnosed and you're just kind of figuring out your world with Parkinson's and your game plan of attack, first steps when you get in to see a PT, one of the first things we like to do is videotape and put together some outcome measures that fit the signs and symptoms that you're dealing with. And an outcome measure is just a test. Usually it's really objective that will give us data, whether it's a time or a score on a test, that tells us where your baseline is right now on this day. And really, we want to kind of encourage a PT for life approach where we never lose sight of you as a patient throughout the course of this disease. So we always have these points in times and these data points to look back on and see if we're making improvements or if we're not, or if there's something that's changed and how can we adjust that. That's one of the biggest things that I try to do in our first PT appointment, as well as a lot of education on why we exercise, why we use intensity, why we use amplitude, why we use cognition, why we use balance training, like why we put all these things in so that exercise makes sense to the person diagnosed with Parkinson's. If you've never exercised before, having a physical therapist who can kind of educate you as to how much exercise is enough, how often should I be exercising, what exercise is right for me, and the rationale behind that, I think is important to carry forward and keep a person consistent with exercise. So those are the big things we try to hit when a person comes in here for the first time.
I think on top of that, probably everybody on here does this too, but I was fortunate to hear Sarah King speak once live at the Parkinson Voice Project in Richardson, Texas. And she talked a lot about how she spends time in the beginning getting to know people, what they like to do, and what maybe their symptoms have taken away from them or their fear of symptoms has taken away from them. And so I try to spend some time looking at any activities that they're into, because as everybody on this panel will tell you, the perfect plan is pointless if it's not something you'll do consistently and safely. On top of that too, I think when people are brand new, I like to talk with them a little bit about common symptoms and what to look out for, but also to remind them that probably like everybody else here does, just because something's on the menu of available symptoms doesn't mean that they're going to get it. When you look at the movement impairments with Parkinson's, since a lot of them look like those of normal aging, but are more pronounced and more quickly accelerated, it would be no different than if any of us went to the grocery store or Costco or Walmart on the weekend and looked around and saw somebody who was a little older than us and said, is that going to be me in X number of years? And the answer is, well, it depends. How does that person live? What do they eat? What are they doing? What are they not doing? So there's, to Angie's point from earlier, a ton of education.
Yeah.
Hopefully some listening. I'm talking a lot, but hopefully there's some listening too.
Yeah,
And
oh,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Angie.
I was just going to add, like Nate, I do a lot of outcome measures, and I do like to share the results of my outcome measures with them, so they also have a baseline. And sometimes I even give them, I write it down and give it to them and have them take it to their neurologist, so the neurologist knows like where they're at. And then at progress note, I'll do the same, and then at discharge, just so they have it in hand so they can take it with them to show their neurologist. Because 9 out of 10 times they are making progress, so that's nice.
Yeah. I was just going to add on to what Mike was saying. I think as PTs, we are really, really good at analyzing movement and putting together a plan that's effective. You know, Angie said 9 times out of 10 people improve. But I think something as somebody watching this who is considering going to PT for the first time, I think it's important for you to know that we are here to serve you and your goals. And we're going to make a lot of recommendations. We're going to notice a lot of things, and we're going to talk a lot because that's just who we are. And we're going to share so much with you. But at the end of the day, it's really important for you to step into our office. First of all, bring someone with you who can help you absorb the fire hydrant of information that we will no doubt spray into your head. But bring your questions, write them down, any fears you have, even if you feel like they're not related to physical therapy. We're going to be a healthcare provider that can spend time with you and actually be able to talk with you and answer your questions. We may not be able to answer all of them, but we will be able to spend time with you. And something I always talk to my clients about is keep track for the next week of the things that are really challenging you movement-wise. Pay attention, write them down, and bring them to us so that we can start to help you with those movement patterns, because we need to set goals in therapy to help you reach them. That's part of our plan of care that we have to submit to your physician. And we want to create goals that are meaningful to you, whether it's to get back on your bike, whether it's to go for a hike with Mike. Yeah, hike with Mike. That's like a good hashtag.
Why don't we call it that?
It's hikes with Mike.
Hikes with Mike. That's like
Throw
a
away the
TV
peak
show.
performer's name.
I want a t-shirt. It's perfect.
Yes. That's a reality show, Hike with Mike. Anyway, but bring your goals and your challenges and what you want to get back to, and kind of let yourself think big. You haven't, don't sell yourself short. If you want to really do something, we've got people in our online exercise program who come in wanting to hike the Grand Canyon. And, you know, at the end of 3 months, 6 months of work, they're able to do a hike around the Grand Canyon. It might not be all the way to the bottom and to the top in one fell swoop, but, you know, don't sell yourself short. You can really work on big goals in therapy, and we like to do that.
Right. How often do people need to see a physical therapist? Is it, you know, is this something that you typically are, when you see somebody for the first time, you're like, we're going to see you for, 10 sessions? Is it really different for each person? And how much is enough? A lot of people ask, I'm afraid my insurance only has so much. If I go and then I lose it, then am I wasting the time, and all of those kinds of things. So how often do you like to see people? How much is too much? How much is enough?
That's a tough question. It's totally, it really does depend on every person who walks in the door. There's a saying that you've met one person with PD, you've met one person with PD. So everyone's different, and every plan of attack is different. Transportation's a huge issue for a lot of people. Getting to and from clinics is really hard. So, you have to kind of make decisions based on not just what their needs are, but what their realistic abilities are to get in and out. So, we have some clients that we see 2 or even 3 times a week, if we can, especially early on. And then hopefully the goal is that as we go along, we can spread those out more often as they're getting into other avenues of exercise, like classes. We do an online training called Daily Dose for those folks that can't get to a PT or a physical therapist or even a trainer that has any training with Parkinson's disease, to give exercise for that too, just to give a different avenue from a physical therapist perspective. There's digital platforms as well to try to reach out to people if they can't get in as often. But the hope is that we can set up a program early. It may take some time to get into initially, and then checkups are more spread out over time as people start to manage this disease on their own, right?
Yeah, I agree with Nate. Everyone is really different. It just depends on what their needs are. And so I'm pretty fortunate because I work in a facility where I can work with them 2-3 times a week, 4 to 6 weeks, and then refer them to a community exercise class that I actually teach. So if they come to the class, I'm really fortunate because I can actually monitor them. And then after 6 months, I may say, oh gosh, it looks like you need a little bit more one-on-one skilled therapy. Get a prescription from your doctor, come back for some more skilled therapy. So I'll see them at that time. Maybe it's not 6 weeks, maybe it's just 4 weeks, and then they go back to the exercise class. So I know it's not every community has this, but we're pretty fortunate that we have this nice continuum of care where I can see them, they can go to the exercise class, and I'm still able to, for the most part, monitor them. And so hopefully they'll stay within our system. And that has worked well for many people. Like several years, people have come back like every 6 months. Sometimes it's once a year, but I'm still able to monitor them, so to speak, to make sure that they're doing okay.
Great. So one question we haven't really covered, but I do get this one a lot. Well, it's a 2-part question. Number 1, is PT hard? Because people are wondering, am I going to be like,
yeah, it's hard, but it's got to be hard.
And then the second thing is like, what makes a PT session different than just going to exercise? Like, why is it different? What happens at a regular, like you've already seen the person, 5 times, they know the drill. What are you doing in those sessions specifically that's different than them just exercising on their own?
Okay, let me finish the PT hard so that I don't sound like a crazy person. I think that everyone here will say PT has to be challenging. I say if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. Angie, you had a really great saying that was something similar.
Yeah, difficult but doable, right?
Difficult but doable. And if you think about the way that your brain wires and the science behind it, your brain is designed and your body's designed to keep you alive. And so if your body and your brain are regularly facing things that are easy, for example, if you get on your stationary bike, you don't even turn it on and you just pedal your legs while you look at your phone or watch TV, not citing that from any of my past clients or anything, you're not being challenged beyond where your body has to adapt. Your brain says, well, I can already do this, so I don't have to pay attention to it. I don't have to change. I don't have to build muscle like Mike was saying. I don't have to rewire my brain and my body to be able to do this. I can do it. And so when I say that PT is hard, and I think everyone would agree, it has to be a little challenging in order to make the changes that you're looking for. But despite what you may have heard about therapists, we don't enjoy just torturing you for the sake of it. And I think that we do have to balance this challenge with also, we push you to the point that we think you can succeed and help you get there. And we're always working towards a goal that you want to get to. So embrace the challenge. And I say that knowing that most of your life, if you have a Parkinson's diagnosis, feels challenging. It feels challenging just to be awake sometimes. And so it can be really hard to encourage yourself to go to a PT who's going to push you even harder. But exercise, as you challenge yourself, your body changes and you get stronger, and suddenly you're able to do things that you couldn't do before. And that makes it all worth it, in my opinion.
Yeah, Mel, for the other part of your question of what makes it different than another type of just general exercise is why physical therapy is different for anyone, which is what we do is custom tailored to each patient's needs. And it's not just based on my opinion or based on Nate or Angie or Sarah's opinions, although they're probably great opinions. It's based on research. So tons of studies that have led to the whole field of physical therapy addressing things in a certain way. So that way you don't have to rely on just what I've seen. I'd like to think I've seen a lot of things, but I'm learning new stuff every day. Whereas what we're doing in the clinic is based on tried and true methods from more than just our own experience. Studies and sometimes meta-analyses or systematic reviews that are studies of studies to show how to address that very specific problem. So it's specific exercise for a specific problem. That's the difference between PT and just working out.
Yeah, that's great. One of the ways that I like to describe it to people sometimes is, you can be in a class and sort of look at somebody and be like, wow, they move really well, like versus somebody that's not moving that well, right? Like, or I'll see people running and I'll be like, wow, the amount of energy that is being used to run 10 feet versus the other person next to them is like astronomical, right? And a PT, a physical therapist, when you go in, like there's, you are all so trained to say like, wow, when you do this exercise, you are not engaging this muscle at all. And actually this is the muscle that you need to engage to do it. And so I always just, kind of say, imagine somebody is there with you and you're doing something and they're pointing, they're just tapping you on the shoulder blade to be like, are you using that? And it's a really different experience than when you just go to the gym by yourself and start, doing things. And that's why PT is more difficult, because you're actually doing the movement correctly, which can feel different. And also if you've trained your body to move incorrectly your whole life, you're having to make up for those things as well. So I do like to say, yep, it probably isn't going to be the most comfortable thing in the world, but in the end, you are going to move so much better, and you're going to be able to take on these symptoms that you get in a much better way. It's just not going to be as awful. So I appreciate that. Okay, so and the other thing I wanted to ask, I wanted to see what your opinions on, because one of the things that, the study that we talk about high intensity. And so people will email me, I get these emails every single week without fail. I read that my RPMs have to be at 85 and I feel like I can't get up there, and I am already dying, breathing and blah, 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 but I'm not doing enough. Like somebody asked me last week, should they get rid of their Airdyne and buy a Peloton because they couldn't get their thing up to 85 RPMs? Can you guys weigh in on that and tell people what is really meant by that 85 RPM and what we're really shooting for? Mike, you're chuckling, Mike. I'm dying to hear what you have to say.
Well, intensity is very subjective. So what might be intense for you, look like you're in really good shape, Mel. I haven't been working out as much as I need to lately. What might be intense for you might be really intense for me right now. Or 6 months from now, if I get back on the wagon of running like I'm supposed to and working out like I used to, then what's intense for me is not the same as what it is for you. So I think people look at studies. For example, one of the cycling ones talks about that target RPM, and those were the parameters they used in that particular study. But since intensity is so subjective, I see some people who intense for them is doing a 6-minute mile. I see other people who intense for them is getting out of the car. And so it's so variable. So some people, that dog is adorable. Some people like to use like a Borg rating of perceived exertion scale, or a modified one, which is like 0 to 10. Other people like to use target heart rates. I think for some of the folks that I see, if they're on medications that cap the upper extreme of their max heart rate's not as helpful. So like when I get somebody in one of our boxing groups, what I like to use is a 0 to 10 scale. And I've got it taped on the base of the punching bag as a reminder between rounds to check in and say, all right, if 0 is resting, like you just woke up from a nap, and if 10 is your maximum effort that you cannot maintain, hopefully you're getting somewhere between a 4 out of 10 and a 6 or a 7 out of 10. And that's just a great place to start, even if they didn't have Parkinson's. But the risk people run too, at least in my experience, is, I've seen some folks who, to take advantage of neuroprotective benefits of intense exercise, will work to extremes, and to such an extreme that they burn through the available medication in their system. And that can be a problem, because if you're no longer producing dopamine and you burn through your medication, well, you might have a short-term spike in symptoms, and some crazy stuff could happen from there. So working hard is helpful, and working hard consistently is helpful. And a lot of these studies that look at BDNF levels and VEGF and all these other growth factors that we can talk about another time or cite the research of, they're really getting at the idea of consistently working at a moderate to intense level. So it's working hard, but not overdoing. And that's where it's really good to have supervision.
Great.
I've said too much. I'll shut up.
No, that's great. Okay, so should somebody get physical therapy from somebody who is not specialized in Parkinson's?
I would love to say that every community in the country and the world has Parkinson's trained physical therapists, but the reality is there's very few physical therapists that actually focus in neurologic diseases, much less Parkinson's. So it's hard to say that don't feel bad if you are going to a physical therapist that maybe doesn't have Parkinson's training. Physical therapists can help you and can have benefit. We all are trained. We all have a doctorate in physical therapy and are trained with the same tools coming out of college, and whatever college we come from. We're all totally able to give you some benefit and give you functional, work with you on getting improved function. That being said, finding someone who works with neurologic diseases, at the very least, if you have someone in your area at your local hospital, is usually probably the best place to find them. There are some outpatient clinics that focus on neuro, but finding somebody that has kind of that background in neurologic diseases is super beneficial, because we all kind of come from the same mold and thinking about things from a neurological aspect, and that can be really helpful. There are some good resources out there for finding therapists that are trained in Parkinson's certifications, including LSVT Big or Parkinson's Wellness Recovery, PWR. So going to their websites, they both have directories where you can find a trained therapist or trainer to kind of start off with. I think is a great kind of jumping off point to find someone. But getting in to see a physical therapist is an important part of the team that you're developing. And just because you can't find somebody that's maybe Parkinson specific, don't let that stop you.
Great.
And it may be worth asking your PT who's not certified in Parkinson's to consider getting certified in Parkinson's. It's, there are a couple certification options, and you may feel like the only person in your community that has Parkinson's that's trying to find a Parkinson's PT, but it's probably true that there are other people in your community that would benefit from having a Parkinson's PT or a neurological PT. So having that conversation with your PT, I know a lot of people in our online community have done that and successfully gotten their PTs to have a little additional training in Parkinson's. So it doesn't hurt to ask, and it's always valuable for a PT to have additional skills, and it's continuing education for us. So I would ask, why not?
Thank you all for being here. Really, really, really appreciate your time. We're going to put this up on our social media, and we'll put it up on our blog post and share it with everybody. So you've been super helpful in explaining why somebody needs a Parkinson's physical therapist and all the things that you guys can do to help people live well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting, Mel. Appreciate it.
For the opportunity.